Philippines is one of the world's largest archipelago in nation. It is situated in Southeast Asia in the Western Pacific Ocean. Philippines has three main geographical areas. It is Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. Manila is the capital city of the Philippines, but Quezon City is the most populous here in our country. Moreover, Philippines archipelago consisting some 7,100 islands. The alternatively name of our country, the Republic of the Philippines in English. In Filipino, Republika ng Pilipinas. This research paper talks about the performance of the Philippines globalization, and we will going to discuss the major part of globalization. It includes the socio-economic globalization, economic globalization, social globalization, and also the political globalization of the Philippines. And now, I'll be discussing the economic globalization. When we say economic globalization, it refers to the expanding association of world economies. Sa madaling sabihin, ang economies globalization ay ang pagpapalitan ng mga produkto sa iba't ibang bansa. According to Ocampo said that the Philippines economy is a newly industrial country remained to be resilient and competitive enough to be one of the 5 growth performance in the region. However, UNCLOS in 2010 said that the Philippines are thereby show how globalization can simultaneously cause the selective dismantling of economic barriers and enhancement. The import of Philippines hooped 16.6% year-on-year to the biggest since January 2020 of US dollars 9.10 billion in March 2021. After upwardly updated 8.9% development in March. This was the most grounded expansion in inbound shipments in more than 2 years. Ground interest verified in the repercussion of COVID-19 disturbances. Moreover, the Philippines export products includes the Philippines in the year 2020. It includes the coconut oil, banana, gold, nickel, and copper ore. Coconut oil addressed 1.34% of the Philippines yearly esteem, and the nation is the biggest exporter of these products on the world. Banana addressing 1.9% of all fruit. The Philippines has under 0.66% of it. Gold shipment has addressed 2% of the nation. Free is deemed Switzerland is the main exporter of gold. Nickel exporter has 0.49% and the Philippines shipments of nickel ore and takes 83%. The main partner of Philippines in export products is Switzerland, Hong Kong, China, and Japan.
Now I will discuss the performance of the Philippines in international trade. The Philippines is known for its mineral resources such as gold and nickel, and this country is also known when it comes to agriculture, such as exporting coconut oil and bananas. In fact, the Philippines has become among one of the fastest growing economies in the world in recent years. According to the World Bank 2018, during 2017, the Philippines was one of the region's top 3 growth performers. The Philippines GDP increased at 6.9% annual growth in 2017 compared to 6.7% annual growth in 2016. Moreover, according to the World Bank 2018, poverty reduction will certainly be aided by sustainable growth, assuming that the poverty rate responds to economic growth in the same way it has in the past. The poverty rate based on the lower to middle income poverty line of $3.20 per day is projected to fall from 27% in 2015 to 22.9% and 21.7% in 2018 and 2019, respectively, as long as economic growth remains stable. The study said that according to this forecast, 1 million of Filipinos will be lifted out of the poverty every year. Based on these studies that we have gathered, the performance of the Philippines is improving every year because Philippines is not far behind to the big and rich countries here in Asia, such as China and Vietnam, when it comes to economic growth. But by the year 2020, there was a disease called coronavirus that came from China and spread to other countries, and eventually it became pandemic. As a result, many establishments closed and many businesses went bankrupt, and even worse, millions of Filipinos lost their job. According to Asian Development Bank 2020, as a result of COVID-19 outbreak, Philippines economy is anticipated to collapse by 7.3% in 2020 before recovering to 6.5% in 2021.
According to Chumakov Alexander N., by the early 21st century, the process of globalization of social relation in the main has been practically completed in its due form. But with respect of the content, the humankind is still to become a global community. This assumes serious change in people's outlook, cultural tradition, and values. There is no alternative to the united humankind, and consequently, for the sake of preservation of the civilization of planet, there should be established not only common principles and rules of joint life, but also common responsibilities for every individual. That is why we think that the transition from understanding global problems to the real processes of globalization, which we now observe, must sooner or later be replaced with the primary interest in the question, how to form a new international order in the integral interdependent world in order to make it at last safe and stable. However, a solution or even a right settlement of this task is ahead, since it is interlinked with another, much more difficult task, the problem of human being and humanism.
In the context of cultural globalization, one can point out the increasing diffusion throughout the world of the unified norms of behavior, free from religious and other geological foundations. Such behavior may be found in airports, railways, stations, supermarkets, and other public places where individuals behave like everyone else, independently of their belief, ethnic and cultural origins, etc. In this sense, the youth is the best environment for the dissemination of global culture because they are less than the elder generation influenced by tradition cultures and stereotypes of thinking and behavior formed in a community. Due to this, the youth also become a main object of manipulation of mass media, political, religious, criminal, and other groups, which under the condition of globalization, acquire additional opportunities to influence both separate group and mass consciousness as a whole, pointing to the fact one of the leaders of the New Left, the mass social media movement of the late 1960s, Theodore Roosevelt, wrote the politics, education, leisure, entertainment, culture as a whole, subconscious symbols, and even the protest against the technocracy become object of purely technical control and purely technical manipulation. Ross Zach, 1967.
Thus, the further development of global studies will have to end sooner or later in understanding the nature and essence of humans themselves as the main cause of all their problems and difficulties. What in the history of philosophy has not been mentioned once? In the works of all the great humanists from antiquity to modernity, as Nikolai Berdyaev, philosophers constantly return to the understanding that to unriddle a mystery of being. Know yourself, and through this you will know the world. All attempts of external understanding of the world, without dipping into the depth of man, give just knowledge of the surface of things, for the understanding of the meaning is concealed in the very man. Berdyaev, 1989-93.
In this graph, it shows the consecutive year and the population of the Philippines from year 2000 to 2020. And I also include the latest update of the population in this year 2021. According to Worldometer 2021, in the year of 2000, the population of the Philippines was 77,991,755. By 2010, it increased to 93,966,780, and it further increased last year 2020 by 109,581,778, and the current population of the Philippines as of June 9, 2021 is 110,942,243. The population of the Philippines is expectedly increase in the coming months because the year 2021 is not over yet, and we are just in the middle year. The Philippines is starting place in the global rank when it comes to population.
Lander of the Philippines. According to SEA 2015, the Philippines are an archipelago of 7,107 islands that cover 300,000 square kilometers, 30 million hectares of land, and 1,830 square kilometers of water. Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao are the largest island groups. According to the Philippine Statistic Authority, agriculture covered 24% or 71,900 square kilometers of the Philippines' total land area. Temporary crops account for 48% of total agricultural land, while permanent crops accounts for 46%. Crops account for 50% of the entry share of agriculture in the countries. GDP followed by livestock 14%, poultry 11%, fisheries 18%, and the agriculture service 8%. The major crops in the Philippines are rice, corn, coconut, sugarcane, banana, pineapple, coffee, mango, tobacco, abaca, peanut, mung bean, cassava, sweet potato, tomato, garlic, onion, bulb, cabbage, eggplant, calamansi, and rubber. Major livestock are carabao, hog cattle, goat dairy, and the major of fishery are milkfish, tilapia, tiger prawn, yellowfin, tuna. Poultry product in the country are chicken, duck, chicken eggs, and duck eggs. Base sa SEA 2015, ang kapuluan ng Pilipinas ay mayroong 7,000 na mga isla na sumasaklaw ng 300,000 square kilometer o 30 milyong hektaryang lupa at 1,830 square kilometer of water. Base sa Philippine Statistic Authority, sa 24% na kalupaan ng Pilipinas ay ginagamit para sa agriculture na nangangulugan na ang pinakamalaking contributor ng pagunlad ng ating ekonomiya ay ang agriculture sector. 50% ng gross domestic income ay nangangailangan ng agriculture. Nagpapakita ito ng napakalaking bahagi ng pagunlad ng ating bansa ang maitutulong ng agricultural sector.
Hi, today I'm going to discuss the national income. Today, we are amidst of crisis. Our national income decreases due of a lot of factors, mainly because there is a huge number of people who have lost their jobs. Most of the Filipinos relies on their job as their source of income. Because of this pandemic, many are suffering and experiencing poor life. Consumer of goods and services decreases, and this affects our economy, specifically our national income. Our national income depends on the number of consumer. The higher the number of consumer, the higher the national income. Nowadays, unemployment diverted into a growing number of small businesses. This help our national income, but this innovation make it hard to the less fortunate people because they can feel that they are being left behind. The definition of national income can help us to understand this concept and to determine the function of economics, the relationship itself between consumer and the factors determining it. That's all.
Political globalization. Political globalization is determined by the number of embassies and high commission in a country, the number of international organizations to which the country is a member, the number of treaties signed between two or more states. More information and original data can be obtained. Trade and investment policy have been the major policy tools which shapes the Philippine industrial policy. In the government trade policy made liberal use of tariffs and import licensing requirements to protect local industries. The other policy measures which have had a major influence on industrial performance include the exchange rate and use of monetary policy instruments. The government plays a key role in developing the country, especially trade, and makes export and import policy to increase income. Governments have several roles to play in international trade. The first facility is in the form of either a transit infrastructure facilities or facilities in the business licensing process. The second facility is to minimize risk through investment and international trade policies. Besides, the government needs to manage its business by controlling the exchange rate and inflation.
International business is conducted through the mobility of capital, formation of manufacturing and trading center, and the movement of techniques and manager borders that require the role of government. The government provides capital to facilitate international business activities to increase the national income. When the government enforces law or regulation in the country business, it has legal protection of contract executed before the commencement of business. Membership in international organizations. The Philippines is a founding member of United Nations, World Trade Organization, Association of Southeast Asian Nations, the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation Forum, and the East Asian Summit. As a founding and active member of United Nations, the country has been elected as the Security Council. Carlos P. Romulo was the former president of the United Nations General Assembly. The country is active participant in peacekeeping mission, particularly in East Timor. Over 10 million Filipinos live and work overseas. The Philippines is a founding and active member of ASEAN, Association of Southeast Asian Nations. It hosts several summits and is an active contributor of direction of policies of the blocs. It's also a member of East Asian Summit, the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation, also known as APEC, the Group of 24, and the Non-LGBT Movement. The country is also seeking to obtain observation status of Islamic Cooperation.
Government policies regarding international trade. Government policies controls imports to protect domestic industries including tariff, subsidies, quota system, taxes, goods and services between two countries of developed and developing countries. International trade are exchange of goods and services between two countries. Items are commonly cell phone, television, clothing, machinery, equipment, and food. According to John D. Daniels, international business is all commercial transactions of private and governmental sales, investments, and transportations that takes place between two or more countries. People think that imported products are more valuable than local products. International trade may have an impact to the small businesses that are not yet ready for the export products, especially in the developing countries. There are three major policies of the government, that is tariff, subsidy, and quota system. Tariff is a tax from import or export products that produces revenue to goods and services brought here in the country. Subsidy is a money granted by the government to a private person to help business owners in lower price or in competitive price. It is usually in the form of cash or tax reduction. Quota system or the protectionism is limiting the number of import or export products according to its demand in a certain period of time.
Conclusion. The Philippine globalization is the process of interaction and integration among the people and government of different nations. The economic globalization in the Philippines is remained to be resilient and competitive enough to be one of the 5 growth performances in the region. The import and export of partnership has been increasing. Then the performance in international trade in the Philippines was one of the region's top 3 growth performances.
In the political globalization is determined by the government policies regarding international trade and membership international organization. In the government trade policies made liberal use of tariff and importing licensing requirements to protect local industries. that the government was a role in developing the country, especially in the trade and make export and import policies to increase income. The Philippines have a membership in other nations and some organizations, some of the active in Asia.
In social globalization in the Philippines has three dimensions. First is the personal contact like via travel. Second is information flows. And the last is cultural proximity. Social globalization have the disadvantage and advantage in our life or in our export and import of our goods and services. The population land area of the Philippines and the national income is under socio-economic profile. The population of the Philippines have 300,000 square kilometers of land and 1,830 square kilometers of water.
The national income of this year was to face a pandemic so that our economies fall into decreasing the gross domestic product or the GDP in our country. We can comprehend situation to determine the function of the economic relation itself between consumers and the various factors.